Oliver carefully parked the sleek, silver car in their driveway, a wide grin spreading across his face. It was Emily's birthday, and he had spared no expense to make it memorable. As he stepped out of the car, Emily emerged from their cozy suburban home, her eyes widening in astonishment. "Oliver, is this for me?" Emily gasped, her voice trembling with disbelief as she approached the car. "Happy birthday, my love," Oliver replied warmly, excitement evident in his tone. "I wanted to surprise you." Emily's hands flew to her mouth, overwhelmed by the grand gesture. "Oh my God, Oliver. This is incredible," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with tears of joy as she admired the luxurious gift. After a celebratory dinner at their favorite restaurant, Oliver couldn't resist taking another look at the car before calling it a night. He opened the back door, intending to check everything was in place, when his heart sank. Nestled on the back seat were a bunch of used condoms, their presence like a chilling whisper of betrayal in the silent night. Oliver's hands trembled as he stared at them, disbelief and hurt flooding his mind. "No," Oliver breathed, shaking his head in disbelief. His thoughts raced, trying to comprehend what he had found. How could this be happening? The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Emily, his wife, whom he had trusted with all his heart, had betrayed him in the most intimate way possible. "Why?" Oliver muttered to himself, his voice thick with emotion as he closed the car door quietly, trying to process the pain and betrayal he felt. As he walked back to the house, his mind replayed Emily's excited reaction to the gift earlier in the evening. The joy in her eyes now felt like a cruel mockery, tarnished by the truth he had just discovered. This wasn't just about a car anymore. It was about shattered trust and a marriage hanging on the precipice of a devastating revelation. Oliver couldn't shake off the unsettling discovery from earlier that night. He paced in the dimly lit hallway, his mind wrestling with the implications of the used condoms he had found in the car. Unable to sleep, he descended to the ground floor, hoping to find solace in the quiet of the living room. As he approached the room, the muffled sound of Emily's voice caught his attention. She was speaking in hushed tones, her words tinged with a familiarity that sent a chill down Oliver's spine. "He's just a provider, babe." Emily's voice floated through the cracked door, laden with casual indifference. "That loser can't do anything. He is too attached to me." Oliver's heart sank. The reality of her betrayal hit him like a physical blow. Gripped by a mixture of shock and seething rage, he leaned closer to hear more, his breaths shallow and ragged. "I know, right?" Emily continued, her voice betraying no hint of remorse. "It's like he's obsessed or something. I can't deal with his neediness anymore." Oliver's fists clenched involuntarily, his nails digging into his palms as he struggled to process Emily's callous words. The woman he loved, the woman he had built a life with, was casually discussing their relationship with someone else. How long has this been going on? Oliver wondered, his mind racing with questions he feared to ask. Every word Emily uttered pierced his heart like a knife, shattering the illusion of their marriage's sanctity. He staggered back, his body trembling with a potent mixture of betrayal and anger. His mind raced with thoughts of confronting her, of demanding an explanation for her deceitful actions. But he knew he needed to gather himself first, to plan his next move carefully. Silently retreating to the shadows, Oliver leaned against the wall, his mind replaying Emily's words over and over. The realization burned like a fire within him, igniting a fierce determination to confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. This wasn't just about Emily's infidelity anymore. It was about reclaiming his dignity, about confronting the woman who had shattered his trust so callously. Oliver sat at his desk, the glow of his computer screen illuminating the determined lines on his face. His mind churned with thoughts of betrayal and retribution, of reclaiming the shattered pieces of his life. "I can't let her get away with this," he muttered to himself, fingers tapping against the keyboard as he researched meticulously. After hours of careful planning and deliberation, Oliver's course of action became clear. He couldn't confront Emily directly. He needed to be strategic, methodical. "I'll show her what it means to betray me," he vowed silently, his jaw set with grim determination. The next morning, with steely resolve, Oliver executed the first step of his plan. He retrieved a hidden GPS tracker and a small, discreet device from a secure location in the house. These tools would become his silent witnesses, his allies in the pursuit of justice. Carefully, with hands steady despite the turmoil raging within him, Oliver installed the GPS tracker beneath the dashboard of the car. He placed the small device in a concealed compartment near the steering wheel, ensuring it would capture every conversation and movement unnoticed. "It's done," Oliver whispered to himself, a fleeting sense of satisfaction mingling with the knot of anger and hurt in his chest. Over the following days, Oliver maintained a facade of normalcy, concealing his plans beneath a veneer of calmness. He observed Emily closely, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. Each passing hour fueled his determination. He rehearsed possible scenarios in his mind, imagining the look of shock and guilt on Emily's face when she realized she had been caught. "I won't rush this," Oliver reminded himself, the weight of his emotions pressing down on him like a burden too heavy to bear alone. Through sleepless nights and restless days, Oliver honed his plan, refining every detail until it gleamed with a cold, calculated precision. He knew that revenge was a dish best served cold, and he intended to make Emily taste every bitter morsel of deceit she had fed him. As the days turned into weeks, Oliver's patience wore thin, the anticipation of the inevitable confrontation gnawing at his insides. He knew he couldn't delay any longer. Soon, the truth would be revealed, and Emily would face the consequences of her betrayal. "I'll make her regret ever crossing me," Oliver vowed silently, his eyes glittering with a resolve that burned brighter than any fury he had ever known. Oliver's nights blurred into days as he meticulously tracked Emily's movements, his determination unyielding despite the emotional turmoil raging within him. "We'll see how deep this betrayal goes," Oliver muttered to himself, his voice tinged with a mixture of anger and sorrow. From the moment Emily left their home each morning, Oliver shadowed her discreetly, his car blending into the fabric of the city streets like a silent observer. He watched as she met with her friends, ran errands, and seemingly went about her daily routine with an air of innocence. But Oliver knew better. As the days stretched into weeks, he gathered the evidence he needed, capturing Emily's clandestine meetings with her affair partner through the lenses of his hidden surveillance. He watched them exchange whispered words and stolen glances, their intimacy a stark contrast to the vows she had once pledged to him. "I trusted you," Oliver murmured bitterly, his hands tightening around the steering wheel as he reviewed the footage late into the night. Each piece of evidence he collected became a weight around his heart, a painful reminder of the life they had built together now crumbling at his feet. Yet, he persisted, driven by a need for closure, for justice. "I won't let her deny this," Oliver vowed silently, his jaw clenched with a determination that bordered on obsession. In the quiet solitude of his makeshift surveillance room, Oliver mapped out Emily's movements with precision, piecing together a timeline of her deception. He stored the damning footage in a secure location, knowing that soon, the truth would emerge from the shadows. "There's no turning back now," Oliver whispered to himself, the gravity of his actions settling over him like a shroud. He knew that what he uncovered would irrevocably alter the course of their lives, but he no longer cared. For Oliver, this was about more than just infidelity. It was about reclaiming his dignity, about confronting the woman who had shattered his trust with callous indifference. And as he watched Emily's shadowy figure disappear into the night once more, Oliver's resolve burned brighter than ever. Under the cover of darkness, Oliver sat in his car, his eyes fixed on the dimly lit restaurant where Emily and her affair partner had chosen to rendezvous. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his heart racing with a potent mix of emotions. "I need to see this for myself," Oliver muttered through gritted teeth, his voice tight with restrained fury. As Emily and her companion emerged from the restaurant, laughter and easy familiarity danced between them like a cruel mockery of the life they had once shared. Oliver's jaw clenched as he watched them, his emotions swirling in a turbulent storm. "I trusted you," he whispered, the words heavy with accusation as he followed them discreetly through the labyrinth of city streets. The night air hung heavy with tension, each passing moment punctuated by the echoing footsteps of betrayal. Oliver's mind raced with images of their life together, juxtaposed with the painful reality unfolding before his eyes. "They think they're untouchable," Oliver muttered bitterly, his knuckles white against the darkness of the car's interior. As they arrived at a secluded spot by the waterfront, Oliver parked at a safe distance, his eyes trained on the clandestine pair. He watched them exchange tender gestures, oblivious to the storm brewing within Oliver's heart. Anger surged through him like a relentless tide, fueled by the memories of Emily's lies and deceit. Yet, beneath the rage, a deeper pain simmered, a raw, unyielding ache of betrayal that threatened to consume him whole. "I won't let them get away with this," Oliver vowed silently, his voice a whisper against the backdrop of the night. Hours passed like fleeting seconds as Oliver remained vigilant, capturing every fleeting glance and whispered conversation with the precision of a hunter stalking his prey. His emotions fluctuated between seething anger, piercing hurt, and a cold determination that burned brighter with each passing moment. "They deserve each other," Oliver muttered darkly, his eyes narrowing with a resolve forged in the crucible of betrayal. As the night wore on, Emily and her affair partner finally parted ways, their laughter fading into the silence of the deserted streets. Oliver waited until they were out of sight before starting his car, his mind already racing with plans for the next phase of his meticulously crafted revenge. "I'm not finished with you yet," Oliver murmured, his voice laced with a chilling determination that echoed through the empty streets. The night was still, save for the distant hum of city life echoing through the empty streets. Oliver sat in his car, parked in the shadows, his eyes fixed on the signal from the GPS tracker he had meticulously planted in Emily's car. "This is it," Oliver muttered to himself, his hand trembling slightly as he gripped the small remote in his palm. With a flick of his thumb, he pressed the button. In an instant, chaos erupted. The sound of screeching tires and shattering glass pierced the quiet night, followed by the sickening crunch of metal meeting concrete. Oliver's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the scene unfold before him, a macabre tableau of destruction and despair. The crash site was bathed in the harsh glow of streetlights, casting long shadows that danced across the pavement. Bystanders gathered in stunned silence, their faces twisted in horror as they tried to make sense of the wreckage before them. Emily's car lay mangled and twisted, smoke billowing from its shattered windows. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Oliver's breath caught in his throat as he realized the magnitude of what he had done. "What have I done?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of voices and sirens. He knew he couldn't stay. With trembling hands, Oliver started his car and drove away from the scene, his mind reeling with the weight of his actions. Guilt and regret clawed at his conscience, threatening to overwhelm him as he disappeared into the night. Back at home, Oliver paced the living room, haunted by the images of the crash playing on an endless loop in his mind. The reality of what he had orchestrated crashed over him like a tidal wave, leaving him gasping for air. "I never meant for this to happen," Oliver muttered, his voice thick with remorse. But deep down, he knew that he had crossed a line from which there was no return. The consequences of his actions would ripple through their lives, forever altering the course of their futures. As the hours passed, Oliver waited in agonizing silence, dreading the inevitable knock on the door that would signal the end of everything he had known. The night air was thick with tension as Emily stumbled out of the wreckage, her hands trembling as she fumbled for her phone. Blood trickled from a gash on her forehead, mixing with tears of shock and disbelief. 911, "What's your emergency?" The operator's voice crackled through the phone. "There's been a terrible accident," Emily managed to choke out, her voice raw with panic. "Please, you have to hurry." As sirens blared in the distance, Emily's mind raced with fragments of disbelief and grief. She had never imagined that a night meant for secrecy and stolen moments would end in such tragedy. "He's not breathing," Emily sobbed into the receiver, her words a desperate plea for help. "Please, please hurry." Unbeknownst to Oliver, Emily had installed a dashcam in the car, a precaution against unforeseen accidents or mishaps. It had captured every harrowing moment of the crash, preserving the truth in stark, unforgiving clarity. Minutes stretched into eternity as paramedics arrived on the scene, their faces grim as they assessed the severity of the situation. Emily watched helplessly as they worked to save her affair partner, their efforts a desperate race against time. "He's gone," one of the paramedics murmured, clinching impartiality. "I'm sorry," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible over the clamor of voices and sirens. Hours later, in the cold silence of a hospital waiting room, Emily sat alone with her thoughts. Her mind replayed the events of that fateful night, each memory a dagger of regret and sorrow. "I never wanted this," Emily murmured, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I never wanted any of this." But the truth remained. A life had been lost, and Emily would forever carry the weight of that knowledge. The dashcam, a silent sentinel of truth, bore witness to the choices she had made and the consequences she could never undo. The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet suburban street as police officers gathered around the wreckage of Emily's car. Yellow tape fluttered in the breeze, marking off the scene of the tragic accident that had claimed a life just hours earlier. "We need to gather every piece of evidence," Detective Ramirez instructed his team, his tone brisk and authoritative. "This is a priority investigation." As the officers meticulously combed through the debris, Emily stood nearby, her eyes swollen from tears she had shed throughout the night. Her hands shook as she clutched a tissue, her mind spinning with fragments of disbelief and guilt. "I can't believe this is happening," Emily murmured to herself, her voice a broken whisper. Detective Ramirez approached her gently, his expression a mix of sympathy and professional detachment. "Ms. Oliverson, I understand this is a difficult time, but we need your cooperation to understand what happened." Emily nodded numbly, her thoughts a jumble of sorrow and confusion. She watched as the officers retrieved Emily's personal belongings from the car, each item a poignant reminder of the life that had been lost. "We found a dashcam in the vehicle," one of the officers reported, holding up the small device for Detective Ramirez to inspect. "Good," Detective Ramirez replied, his eyes narrowing with determination. "Let's get it to the lab and see what it recorded." As the investigation progressed, Emily retreated into herself, consumed by grief and a gnawing sense of guilt. She couldn't shake the feeling that somehow she had played a part in the tragedy that had unfolded before her eyes. "I should have known," Emily whispered to herself, her voice hollow with regret. Days turned into weeks as the investigation continued, each passing moment stretching Emily's fragile resolve to its breaking point. She spent sleepless nights replaying the events of that fateful night, searching for answers that seemed to elude her grasp. "I need to understand," Emily pleaded with Detective Ramirez during one of their meetings, her eyes pleading for absolution. "I need to know what happened." Detective Ramirez studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. "We're doing everything we can, Ms. Oliverson," he assured her quietly, "but we need your help to piece together the puzzle." Emily nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. She knew that the truth, once uncovered, would irrevocably alter the course of her life, a life forever marked by the consequences of choices she could never undo. Emily stood outside Oliver's office building, her hands trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve. She had rehearsed the conversation in her mind 100 times, each scenario playing out with varying degrees of disbelief and anger. "He needs to know," she muttered to herself, her voice tinged with determination as she pushed open the glass door. Inside, Oliver sat at his desk, his face a mask of strained composure as he pored over files and reports. He looked up as Emily entered, his eyes widening in surprise at the sight of her tear-streaked face. "Emily, what are you doing here?" Oliver asked cautiously, rising to his feet. "We need to talk," Emily replied tersely, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Oliver's brow furrowed with concern as he gestured towards a nearby conference room. "Of course. Let's talk." As they settled into their seats, the air between them thick with unspoken tension, Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation she had been dreading. "I know what you did," Emily began, her voice shaking with restrained fury. "You caused the crash. You killed him." Oliver's eyes widened in shock, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "Emily, you don't understand," he protested, his voice tinged with desperation. "I would never." "Don't lie to me," Emily interrupted, her voice rising with anger. "I found the GPS tracker in my car. I know you were following us that night." Oliver's jaw clenched as he struggled to find the words to defend himself. "Emily, I was trying to protect us," he stammered, his voice pleading for understanding. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she shook her head in disbelief. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice a broken echo of the woman she once was. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them, each grappling with the weight of accusations and regrets that threatened to tear their fragile world apart. "I loved you, Oliver," Emily finally whispered, her voice barely audible over the tumult of emotions raging within her. "I trusted you." Oliver reached out tentatively, his hand hovering over hers in a gesture of futile comfort. "Emily, please," he pleaded, his voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted this. I never wanted any of this." But Emily pulled away, her gaze hardening with resolve. "It's too late for that now," she said quietly, her words a final verdict on their shattered marriage. As Emily stood to leave, Oliver watched helplessly, the realization sinking in that their lives would never be the same again. The evidence against him mounted like a damning testament to his actions, leaving him to face the consequences of choices that had forever altered the course of their futures. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs and whispers as Oliver sat at the defendant's table, his hands clenched in his lap. Dressed in a somber suit, he glanced nervously around the room, his eyes catching glimpses of familiar faces and curious onlookers. "Order in the court," the judge's voice boomed, cutting through the restless atmosphere. "We are here today to hear the case of the state versus Oliver Anderson." Emily sat in the front row, her expression unreadable as she watched the proceedings unfold. Her heart ached with conflicting emotions, grief for the life that had been lost, anger at the betrayal that had led them to this moment. The prosecution presented its case methodically, laying out the evidence against Oliver with precision. Photos of the crash scene flashed on a screen, each image a stark reminder of the tragedy that had torn apart their lives. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor began, his voice steady and measured. "The defendant, Oliver Anderson, knowingly and intentionally caused the death of David Richards." As witnesses took the stand, their testimonies painted a chilling portrait of Oliver's meticulous planning and calculated actions. Emily listened in silence, her heart heavy with the weight of their words. "He seemed obsessed," one witness testified, their voice echoing through the hushed courtroom. "He followed them everywhere, like he was waiting for the right moment." Oliver's defense attorney fought vigorously to undermine the prosecution's case, questioning the reliability of the evidence and the motives of the witnesses. Yet, with each passing moment, the truth began to unravel with relentless clarity. "I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt," Oliver pleaded during his testimony, his voice cracking with emotion. "I was trying to protect her, to protect us." But Emily's eyes remained fixed on the witness stand, her resolve unshaken by Oliver's desperate pleas. She had seen the evidence, heard the testimony. It was too late for apologies or explanations. As the trial drew to a close, tension hung thick in the air, each moment pregnant with the weight of impending judgment. The jury deliberated in silence, their faces solemn as they wrestled with the gravity of their decision. "We find the defendant, Oliver Anderson, guilty," the jury foreperson announced, their voice a solemn pronouncement that echoed through the courtroom. Oliver's world crumbled around him as the judge pronounced the sentence, a sentence that would forever seal his fate. Emily watched from across the room, her heart heavy with a mixture of sorrow and relief. In the quiet aftermath of the trial, as Oliver was led away in handcuffs, Emily stood outside the courthouse, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The truth had been revealed, justice had been served, but the scars of betrayal would linger long after the courtroom drama had faded into memory. Inside the courtroom, tension gripped the air like a vice as the prosecution prepared to present its final piece of evidence. Emily sat in the front row, her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the large screen at the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor began, his voice steady and authoritative. "The state would like to present Exhibit A, the dashcam footage recovered from the defendant's vehicle." A hush fell over the courtroom as the footage played, capturing the moments leading up to the fatal crash in stark, unyielding clarity. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she watched the scene unfold. The reality of that night laid bare for all to see. In the video, Emily and her affair partner laughed and talked animatedly, oblivious to the tragedy that loomed just ahead. Oliver's car appeared in the frame, following them at a discreet distance, the GPS tracker silently recording their every move. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as the footage captured the fateful moment when Oliver pressed the button, triggering the crash that would change everything. The sound of screeching tires and shattering glass reverberated through the room, a haunting echo of the events that had shattered their lives. "I can't watch this," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks as she turned away, unable to bear the weight of her guilt and grief. As the video concluded, silence settled over the courtroom, broken only by the soft murmur of voices and the occasional shuffle of papers. Oliver sat at the defense table, his face pale and drawn, his hands trembling with the knowledge that his carefully constructed plan had unraveled before his eyes. The defense attorney rose to cross-examine the prosecution's presentation, but the damage had been done. The dashcam footage had laid bare the truth, a truth that Oliver could no longer deny. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," Oliver murmured during his final statement to the court, his voice a hollow echo of the man he once was. "I only wanted to protect her." But Emily remained unmoved, her eyes fixed on the judge as she awaited the verdict that would finally bring closure to the nightmare that had consumed their lives. After deliberation, the jury returned with their decision, a decision that would echo through the corridors of justice for years to come. "We find the defendant, Oliver Anderson, guilty of manslaughter," the jury foreperson announced solemnly, their words sealing Oliver's fate. Emily closed her eyes briefly, a mix of emotions washing over her: relief, sadness, and a profound sense of loss for the man she had once loved. As Oliver was led away in handcuffs, their eyes met one last time across the courtroom, a silent exchange of regrets and unspoken apologies that lingered in the air long after he had disappeared from view. Outside the courthouse, Emily stood alone, her heart heavy with the weight of a chapter closed and a future uncertain. The dashcam footage, a silent witness to their downfall, continued to replay in her mind, a haunting reminder of the choices that had led them to this moment of reckoning. The courthouse corridors buzzed with subdued conversation as Emily stood outside the courtroom, her thoughts a tumultuous storm of emotions. Inside, Oliver's sentencing was underway, the weight of his guilt and remorse palpable in the air. As Emily waited, her mind drifted back to the day she had discovered the truth, the day she had stumbled upon Oliver's meticulously planned revenge. She had known about the tracker, about the secret device hidden in her car. And she had known about the dashcam, a silent sentinel that had captured the damning evidence of Oliver's betrayal. "He thought he could outsmart me," Emily muttered to herself, her voice tinged with bitterness and resignation. Inside the courtroom, the judge prepared to deliver the final verdict, unaware of the revelation that would soon turn the tide of justice. Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confession she knew she had to make, a confession that would change everything. "I need to speak to the judge," Emily announced to a court official, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging within her. Moments later, Emily stood before the judge, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to reveal the truth that had remained hidden for so long. "Your Honor," Emily began, her voice clear and unwavering, "there's something you need to know." The judge regarded her with a mix of curiosity and concern, gesturing for her to continue. "I knew about the tracker," Emily confessed, her words hanging heavy in the air. "I knew about the device Oliver planted in my car." Gasps of surprise rippled through the courtroom as Emily's revelation reverberated among the spectators and legal teams alike. Oliver looked up from his seat, his eyes widening in disbelief and dawning realization. "But why?" the judge asked, his voice a measured inquiry. Emily swallowed hard, her gaze steady as she met the judge's eyes. "I suspected Oliver was planning something," she explained quietly. "I installed the dashcam to protect myself, to document his actions in case something went wrong." The courtroom fell silent, the implications of Emily's confession sinking in like stones in still water. The truth, once hidden in the shadows of betrayal, now stood exposed, a testament to the complexities of their fractured relationship. "I never intended for anyone to get hurt," Emily continued, her voice tinged with remorse. "I never imagined it would come to this." The judge listened carefully, weighing Emily's words against the evidence and testimony presented throughout the trial. After a moment of contemplation, he nodded solemnly, his decision clear. In light of this new information, the judge began, addressing the courtroom. "I am ordering a reevaluation of the case. This revelation may have significant implications for the sentencing of the defendant." Oliver's eyes met Emily's across the room, a silent exchange of understanding and regret passing between them. The twists and turns of their tumultuous journey had led them to this moment, a moment where truth and consequences converged in a tangled web of choices and revelations. As the proceedings continued, Emily stepped outside the courtroom, her heart heavy with the weight of a truth finally spoken. The future remained uncertain, but for now, she had found a measure of peace and the courage to confront the past, a past that had reshaped their lives in ways they could never have anticipated. Emily stood silently in the courtroom corridor, her eyes fixed on Oliver as he was escorted away by court officers. His expression was a mix of resignation and disbelief, his hands bound by handcuffs that clinked softly with each step. As Oliver glanced back at her one last time, Emily met his gaze with a mysterious smile, a smile that held secrets untold and questions unanswered. In that fleeting moment, the air between them crackled with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. The reader, too, was left to ponder the depths of Emily's knowledge and the extent of her intentions. How much had she truly known? How far was she willing to go to protect herself from Oliver's betrayal? The courtroom emptied gradually, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts. Outside, the world continued to spin on, oblivious to the turmoil that had unfolded within those hallowed halls of justice. In the quiet aftermath, Emily found herself grappling with the complexities of love and betrayal, trust and deception. The truth had shattered their once idyllic life, leaving behind shards of broken promises and shattered dreams. As she walked away from the courthouse, Emily glanced back one last time, her heart heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. The road ahead stretched out before her, uncertain and winding, yet filled with possibilities yet to be explored. For now, the story ended with Emily's enigmatic smile, a smile that held within it the promise of a future shaped by the choices they had made and the consequences they had yet to face.